first road through the Blue Mountains was once a lifeline, a rough, winding track cut through stone and wilderness. In 1814, road builder William Cox set down a milestone, marking 20 miles from Emu Plains, and the place became known as 20 Mile Hollow. A handful of buildings began to rise from the open and grassy side of a ridge, humble at first, but destined to outlast many. It was a lonely outpost on what may have seemed like the edge of the world, a place of weary travellers, coachmen, and ex-convicts adapting and surviving in a new world. What began as a rough bush inn would become a place of tragedy, boozing, learning and success, and maybe a lingering ghost or two. These are some stories from Woodford Academy, the oldest collection of buildings in the Blue Mountains. To the north of the Academy, within Woodford Reserve, a 10-metre groove is etched into an exposed sandstone slab. Thought to mark a connection line between places, it hints at a time long before European settlement, when this open area, complete with natural spring, likely served as a gathering place for Darug and Gundungurra people who moved and met across these rugged ridges. In 1831, a simple stone and slab hut was built, a squat of about 5 rooms, with a small stable and stockyard close by. It had been built without permission by William James, a man from Worcester in England. He'd previously been sentenced to 7 years transportation for horse theft and shipped to Port Jackson aboard the convict ship Bering. After earning his freedom, William and his wife Mary, along with their 7 kids, settled here at 20 Mile Hollow, quietly claiming a pocket of this land as their own. As the story goes, the James family soon gained a reputation along Cox's Road, and not a flattering one. They were said to illegally sell grog to travellers and to drink heavily themselves. Their tiny inn earned a name as a place of frequent arguments and drunkenness, with much of the daily work falling to their children while their parents argued or drank the hours away. That same year, another former convict, Thomas Pembroke, an Irishman, was officially granted 2 acres of land nearby. Unlike the James family, Pembroke set about building what records describe as a respectable inn, having stonemasons, carpenters, splitters and fencers employed. He named it Woodman's Inn. This structure forms the eastern wing of the main building that stands today, consisting of 5 rooms. A typical layout of the period, 2 larger rooms at the front, 3 smaller rooms behind them, and a detached kitchen set apart from the main building. In 1835, Governor Darling recognised Pembroke's growing enterprise and granted him a further 48 acres of land north of the inn. The flatter ground to the south was soon put to use for livestock, sheep yards, and a produce garden. But Pembroke was far from thrilled to have William and Mary James squatting so close by. Tension simmered between the 2 men, each staking his own claim to the surrounding land, and their disputes became a constant presence at 20 Mile Hollow. Also in 1835, tragedy struck the James family when Mary died by hanging, a story that's long been clouded by rumour, speculation, and the embellishments of time. William James claimed that Mary had taken her own life, using a handkerchief tied to the ceiling rafters. Few believed him, suspicion spread quickly, and he was soon charged with her murder. Thomas Pembroke was called as a witness, but when old mate arrived at the trial he was seriously drunk. His muddled, unreliable testimony led to a mistrial, and with the evidence in disarray, William James was ultimately acquitted. At the second trial, a new witness came forward with an unsettling account. They claimed to have found Mary hanging from the rafters while William stood by, watching. The witness cut her down, and Mary, drunk but revived, erupted into fury, shouting that she'd have been in a better world if she'd been allowed to die. Mary allegedly knocked back even more booze and slipped into another argument with William. She declared she was determined to end her own life, and William, taunting her, told her she wasn't brave enough to do it. Provoked by his words and mentally scarred by the domestic violence she endured, Mary stood back on the box, tied the noose again, and kicked the box away herself. As she hung there, William grabbed her legs and Mary choked, taking her final breath. In truth, Mary's second attempts took place behind a locked door inside the inn. It was her son that eventually forced his way inside and discovered her body. Much of the turmoil surrounding the James family, including the accusations stirred up in the aftermath, was actually fueled by Thomas Pembroke himself, who'd been losing business to William and Mary and had plenty of motive to make trouble for them. William was ultimately sentenced to death and sent to the Phoenix, an ageing vessel moored in Hulk Bay, later known as Lavender Bay. The old ship served as a prison hulk, holding men who awaited secondary transportation to Norfolk Island and Moreton Bay. What became of William after his arrival to the Phoenix is unclear, though some say he may have died aboard the prison ship. Known as the Lady in White, Mary's ghost is said to wander the garden, drift through the halls, and appear in mirrors, sometimes hanging, sometimes walking. Dark times also fell on Thomas Pembroke and his wife Frances. In 1837, Thomas was jailed for theft, leaving Frances to fend for their 9 children. She appealed to the governor, describing herself as an unfortunate and destitute wife. In desperation, she reportedly turned to prostitution, selling herself to passing coachmen to provide for her family. Thomas was later admitted to the Benevolent Asylum in Sydney, where he died in 1842. Frances eventually remarried, moving on from the hardships that had marked the early years of their lives in 20 Mile Hollow. In 1840, the inn was renamed the King's Arms by its new licensee, Josiah Workman. The choice of name may have reflected the inn's close ties to the convicts and soldiers stationed along the road, particularly at 17 Mile Hollow and 18 Mile Hollow just east of the property. The Depression years that gripped New South Wales during the 1840s was felt by all. Land values slumped due to the drought, as did the price of wool, wheat and livestock being sold to Britain. Wages fell and unemployment rose. The presence of convicts, or more so the dozens of thirsty stockade guards based nearby, brought a wave of prosperity to the inn, especially during James Nairn's 3-year stint as publican. Even Captain John Bull, magistrate and assistant engineer overseeing the road's maintenance from 18 Mile Hollow, took up residence at the inn with his family for 2 years, adding to the steady stream of official and civilian business. Until the mid-1840s, the King's Arms was a full day's journey from the nearest inns at Valley Heights and Wentworth Falls. Today, such distances are easily covered in 20 minutes by car, but in the 19th century, these roadside inns were a lifeline, a welcome refuge for weary travellers navigating the long, arduous trek along the rough, unsealed mountain road. The discovery of gold in the Bathurst district in May 1851 brought an end to 20 Mile Hollow's isolation. Thousands of people from all walks of life poured along the western road from Sydney to Bathurst and Turon, driven by dreams of fortune and the promise of that precious shiny metal. It's believed that 1855 saw the first major extension to the inn, and it was also the year owner Michael Hogan sold the property for £1,040 to William Buss. Buss was an ex-convict himself. He was sentenced to life for horse theft, coming from England where he was a publican and innkeeper, arriving on these shores in irons on the Phoenix in 1828 when he was just 19 years old. Buss was granted a ticket of leave in 1836 and a conditional pardon in 1843. He moved to Cowra, which, at the time of his pardon, was only just becoming a township. By his mid-30s, he was buying an inn in the mountains. He was a colourful character, said to greet guests at the door in a distinctive scarlet waistcoat, jingling gold coins in his pocket. The inn became one of the most famous entertainment houses in the West. Buss reportedly hid the day's takings under his mattress rather than trusting a safe or strongbox. Though still officially licensed as the King's Arms, locals and travellers alike knew it as Buss's Inn. He prospered greatly, catering to hopeful gold diggers and entertaining soldiers tasked with escorting gold safely back to Sydney. It was during this period that Cobb & Co. operated its stagecoach services across the mountains for those that could afford it, many of which made regular stops at the inn. The booming traffic prompted a major expansion. The inn nearly tripled in size. The main stone building was extended on the western side, and a suite of rooms was added on the first floor above the new wing. On the ground floor, the main building now housed a ladies' parlour and self-contained quarters for Buss, his wife Bridget, and their kids. The men's tap room, also located next to the ladies' parlour, became the busiest room in the inn. It still bears a painted cartouche of grapes, peaches and corn, a nod to the fruits once fermented into spirits served to thirsty travellers. To the west of the courtyard, a large two-storey dairy was added, while a more substantial kitchen was constructed on the eastern side. Additional accommodation for guests and staff was provided in the attic above, ensuring the inn could cater to the growing stream of visitors. The era of the bustling roadside inn was beginning to dwindle due to the new railway reducing road traffic. William Buss died in 1867. In 1868, Sydney retailer Alfred Fairfax bought the property from Bridget Buss for a bargain £450, before she retired to her 60-acre farm on the banks of the Nepean. He renamed it Woodford House after his home village in England. Fairfax's acquisition, intended as a retreat for himself and his family and friends, reflected a growing change in how people viewed the Blue Mountains. No longer a wild, forbidding landscape, but a place of leisure, fresh air and scenic beauty. By 1869, the property was served by a small railway platform known as Buss's Platform, situated just west of the inn. The platform was later relocated after a fire badly damaged it, plus trains had trouble pulling up while travelling downhill to Sydney. The new station platform was renamed Woodford. In 1874, Fairfax, an amateur astronomer reputed to own the finest 4.5-inch Schroeder telescope in the colony, hosted an observation of the transit of Venus on the former police lock-up land on the western edge of the property. Woodford House continued to operate as a guest house until 1907, when it was leased by the distinguished scholar Jessie McManamey. He transformed the property into the Woodford Academy for boys, living on site with his wife and 2 daughters in the southwestern section of the main building. McManamey encouraged his students to carve their names into desks, window frames, and even the rocks around the property, believing each carving was a way for them to make their mark in history. In 1908, Jessie McManamey made a discovery on his property when he and his students were clearing a field for playing rugby. Lining a drain north of the academy were old grave headstones. He believed they may have originally come from the Bulls camp area during the 1830s and 40s, one belonging to a convict, a soldier, and an infant. McManamey continued to tutor students well into the late 1930s and early 1940s. Then, in 1946, tragedy struck. While walking in front of the academy with his second daughter, Gertrude, they were both hit by a car. Gertrude suffered only minor injuries, but McManamey suffered 2 broken ankles and later died from complications resulting from the accident. Stories about Jessie McManamey, John's elder daughter, are varied and often contradictory. One tale suggests she was a schizophrenic girl, kept locked in her room, where she would stare out the dormer window, tapping on the glass, and supposedly died there at a very young age. While this version is largely fictional, local legends hold that her spirit still lingers, haunting this part of the house to this day. The following story is somewhat closer to the truth. After her father's death, Jessie and Gertrude McManamey continued to live at the academy, taking in boarders and selling off portions of the property to support themselves. Gertrude recalled that Jessie began to withdraw during the 1920s, troubled by what she described as voices ringing in her ears. Over time, Jessie became increasingly reclusive, spending many of her days confined to her room. Jessie did go on to have 2 children herself, and remained at the academy until her death in 1972. In 1979, Gertrude bequeathed the property to the National Trust, on the condition that she continued living there for the rest of her life. She remained at Woodford House until 1986, when her health required better care, and she moved to Queen Victoria Hospital at Wentworth Falls. Gertrude passed away there in 1988, closing the final chapter on a remarkable family legacy that had shaped the academy for more than half a century. Woodford Academy still stands, its brick and sandstone walls bearing the imprint of 2 centuries of hardship, hope, and human endurance. From convicts to scholars, from gold seekers to restless spirits, each left something of themselves here. And if you listen closely in the quiet of the evening, some say you can still hear footsteps in the halls, a tap on an upstairs window, or the faint presence of those who helped shape this place into what it is today.